When a millionaire cheats on his wife of 20 years with their son's tutor, he doesn't expect her to uncover the betrayal and his mother's racist conspiracy to ruin their marriage. But when Olivia shows up in divorce court, wearing that red dress, the game changes forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun shone through the windows of St. Mary's Hospital as Dr. Olivia Stevens finished her morning rounds. At 45, she was at the top of her game, one of the most respected cardiologists in Boston. Walking down the hospital corridor in her white coat, she checked her watch. She had just enough time to make it to Emma's dance recital. "Great work on the Henderson case, Dr. Stevens," said Nurse Jenny, hurrying past with a stack of charts. Everyone at the hospital knew Olivia wasn't just brilliant. She was kind, dedicated, and somehow managed to balance her demanding career with being a mother to 2 teenagers. Olivia smiled, thinking about her family. Her son Marcus was 17 now, getting ready for college applications. Emma, 14, was following in her mother's footsteps with her drive and determination, even if her passion was dance instead of medicine. And then there was Michael, her husband of 20 years, a successful real estate developer who had built his company from nothing. At least that's what Olivia thought she knew about her life. "Dr. Stevens, your husband called," her assistant Sarah said as Olivia gathered her things. "He said not to worry about dinner tonight. He's working late again." Olivia nodded, used to Michael's busy schedule. These days he seemed to be working later and later. She pushed away the small voice of worry in the back of her mind. After all, the Bradford real estate group was expanding rapidly, and Michael was determined to make his mark in Boston's competitive property market. What Olivia didn't know was that across town, in a luxury apartment paid for with Bradford family money, Michael wasn't working at all. He was with Madison Wells, their son's 25-year-old tutor. Madison sat on Michael's lap, her blonde hair falling around her shoulders as she giggled at something he said. "Your mother called earlier," Madison said, running her fingers through Michael's graying hair. "She wants to know if we're still on for dinner tomorrow night." Eleanor Bradford had never approved of her son's marriage to Olivia. Oh, she played the part of the accepting mother-in-law in public. She had to, given the Bradford family's social position. But in private, she had spent 20 years looking for ways to drive a wedge between Michael and his wife. In Madison, she had finally found her perfect weapon. Back at home, Olivia helped Emma practice her dance routine for the upcoming recital. "Mom, do you think Dad will make it this time?" Emma asked, adjusting her ballet shoes. "He promised he would," Olivia said, but she saw the doubt in her daughter's eyes. Marcus sat at the kitchen counter, pretending to study but really scrolling through his phone. "Hey, how are the sessions with Miss Wells going?" Olivia asked him. "Fine," Marcus mumbled, not meeting his mother's eyes. He had seen the way his tutor looked at his father, the way they acted when they thought no one was watching. But how could he tell his mother? How could he break her heart? That night, as Olivia got ready for bed alone again, she noticed something odd on the family iPad. Marcus had left it logged into his email, and there was a message from Madison Wells with an attachment. Olivia didn't mean to pry, but something made her click. Her world stopped. There on the screen were intimate photos of Madison and Michael, together. The timestamps showed they went back months. And in the email thread, Olivia saw something even worse, messages from Eleanor Bradford, arranging payments to Madison's account. Olivia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking. 20 years of marriage, 2 children, all those nights she thought he was working late, all those times Eleanor had smiled to her face while plotting behind her back. The perfect life she thought she had was nothing but a lie. In her bathroom, Olivia gripped the marble counter and stared at her reflection. She saw a woman who had given everything to her family while being betrayed by the people she trusted most. But as tears rolled down her cheeks, something else sparked in her eyes. Determination, rage, a promise of revenge. Olivia Stevens had spent her life saving other people's hearts. Now it was time to save her own and make sure the people who broke it paid dearly for their betrayal. The game was about to change, and none of the players, not Michael, not Madison, and especially not Eleanor Bradford, had any idea what was coming. Olivia didn't sleep that night. How could she when her whole world had just crumbled around her? She sat in her home office until dawn, going through every email, every photo, every piece of evidence of her husband's betrayal. But it wasn't just the affair that made her blood boil. It was the careful planning behind it all. Eleanor Bradford had hired Madison specifically to destroy her marriage. The proof was right there in black and white. Bank transfers, email exchanges, even instructions about how to accidentally bump into Michael at certain times and places. When Michael came home the next morning, still adjusting his tie like nothing was wrong, Olivia was waiting in the kitchen. "Late night at the office?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rage burning inside her. "You know how it is with the new development," Michael said, heading for the coffee maker. "The investors—" "Stop lying." Olivia placed her phone on the kitchen counter. Madison's photos displayed on the screen. "Just stop." Michael froze, coffee pot in hand. The color drained from his face. "Olivia, I can explain." "Explain what? How you've been sleeping with our son's tutor, or how your mother paid her to seduce you?" Olivia's voice rose with each word. 20 years, Michael. 20 years I gave you, and this is how you repay me." In the hallway, Marcus and Emma stood frozen, listening to their parents' argument. Emma grabbed her brother's hand, tears streaming down her face. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. Marcus could only nod. "It's not what you think," Michael stammered. "Madison and I, it just happened." "Nothing just happens when Eleanor Bradford is involved," Olivia shot back. "I found the payments, Michael. The emails. Your mother's master plan to break up our marriage because she could never accept having a black woman in her precious family. Leave my mother out of this. Why should I? She's been involved in our marriage from day one, poisoning it with her racism and her schemes, and you—" Olivia laughed bitterly. "You're such a coward you couldn't even choose your own mistress. You had to have Mommy pick one out for you." Michael slammed his coffee cup down. "Don't talk about my mother that way." "Or what, you'll run to her like you always do? Go ahead. In fact, why don't you pack your bags while you're at it?" "This is my house." "Wrong." Olivia pulled out another stack of papers. "I spent all night talking to my lawyer. This house is in both our names, and since I have proof of your affair and your mother's conspiracy, guess who's not going to be living here anymore?" Upstairs, Emma ran to her room, sobbing. Marcus followed, his own eyes wet with tears. He'd kept his father's secret for months, watching it eat away at him. Now he couldn't help but feel responsible for his mother's pain. "I'm calling my lawyer," Michael threatened. "Good idea. You'll need one." Olivia's voice turned cold. "Oh, and Michael, tell Madison her services as Marcus's tutor are no longer required. I'm sure the school board would be very interested to hear about her." Extracurricular activities with students' parents. After Michael stormed out, Olivia sank into a kitchen chair. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from fury. The privileged world of the Bradfords was about to learn a hard lesson about underestimating Olivia Stevens. Across town, Eleanor Bradford was having breakfast in her mansion when her phone rang. It was Michael, panicking about Olivia's discovery. Eleanor's face hardened as she listened. "Don't worry, darling," she said, into the phone. "I'll take care of everything, I always do." But Eleanor had no idea what was coming, because while she was plotting her next move, Olivia was already 10 steps ahead. The distinguished Dr. Stevens was about to show Boston's elite exactly what happened when you pushed a strong woman too far. In her bedroom, Olivia opened her closet and pulled out a red dress she'd been saving for a special occasion. She smiled grimly as she held it up. It would be perfect for court. Eleanor Bradford was used to getting her way. When she wanted something done in Boston's high society, it happened. But as she sat in her elegant study making phone calls, she realized this time might be different. "What do you mean you can't speak to the judge?" She snapped into her phone. "I don't care how much it costs. I want that emergency custody hearing moved up." On the other end of the line, her lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Bradford, the evidence Dr. Stevens has gathered, it's substantial. And with her reputation in the medical community, I don't care about her reputation. She's trying to destroy my son's life. And that house, it's Bradford property. She has no right. Actually, she does. And there's something else you should know. Dr. Stevens has copies of all the payments you made to Madison Wells." Eleanor's face went pale. She hung up without another word and immediately dialed Madison's number. Meanwhile, at her luxury apartment, Madison was frantically packing her bags. She'd already gotten 3 calls from other wealthy families canceling her tutoring services. Somehow, word had gotten out about her affair with Michael. This wasn't part of the deal, Madison cried when she saw Eleanor's number. "You promised I'd be protected." "Stop being hysterical," Eleanor said coldly. "Come to my house immediately. We need to get our stories straight before—" "Before what?" Madison interrupted. before everyone finds out you paid me to break up your son's marriage. I have bills to pay, Mrs. Bradford, and now my reputation is ruined." At the hospital, Olivia was in her office meeting with her lawyer, Sarah Chen. Unlike Eleanor's high-priced legal team, Sarah was young, hungry, and had something to prove. "They're trying to paint you as an absent mother," Sarah explained, spreading documents across Olivia's desk, saying your career came before your family, but I've got statements from Marcus's teachers, Emma's dance instructors, even your hospital staff all testifying to what an involved parent you've been. Olivia nodded, but her mind was on her children. Emma had barely eaten since the confrontation with Michael, and Marcus was drowning in guilt over keeping his father's secret. "Mom?" Marcus appeared in her office doorway, his shoulders slumped. "Can we talk?" Sarah gathered her papers. "I'll give you two a moment." Once they were alone, Marcus broke down. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you about Dad and Miss Wells. I saw them together at Starbucks months ago, but Dad said it was just a tutoring meeting. Then I found messages on her laptop when she left it open. But I didn't want to hurt you." Olivia pulled her son into a hug. "This is not your fault, baby. None of it. But Grandma Eleanor, she was always so nice to my face. All those Christmas presents, the trips, it was all fake, wasn't it?" "Some people," Olivia said carefully, "are very good at pretending, but we don't have to pretend anymore." That evening at the Bradford mansion, Eleanor was hosting an emergency family meeting. Michael sat slumped in an armchair while Eleanor paced the room. "We need to act fast," she declared. "I've already spoken to Judge Harrison's wife at the country club. If we can prove Olivia's work schedule makes her an unfit mother—" "Stop it, Mother." Michael's voice was tired. "Just stop." "Stop what? Trying to save this family's reputation? Do you have any idea what this scandal could do to Bradford real estate?" "You're the one who caused this scandal," Michael shouted, finally standing. "You never gave Olivia a chance. You hired Madison to destroy my marriage." Eleanor's face hardened. "I did what I had to do. That woman was never good enough for you. Do you think anyone in our circle really accepted her? They tolerated her because of your money, Michael. Nothing more." Neither of them noticed Madison standing in the doorway, recording everything on her phone. She'd learned from Eleanor Bradford herself, always have leverage. Back at home, Olivia was helping Emma with her homework when her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number with a video attachment. "Mom?" Emma asked, seeing her mother's expression change. "What is it?" Olivia played the video, her eyes widening as she heard Eleanor's confession. "That baby girl," she said with a satisfied smile, "is the sound of your grandmother digging her own grave." The next morning, Boston's elite woke up to their worst nightmare. Their private world of prejudice and manipulation exposed on every local news channel. Eleanor Bradford's face was everywhere, her words about Olivia playing on repeat. At the hospital, Olivia walked through a sea of sympathetic faces. Everyone had seen the news. Everyone knew what the Bradfords had done. "Dr. Stevens," Nurse Jenny caught up with her. "The hospital board is meeting right now. They're voting to remove Mrs. Bradford from the fundraising committee." Olivia just nodded. It was only the beginning. Eleanor Bradford was about to learn that every kingdom, no matter how mighty, could fall. The Bradford name had always opened doors in Boston, but now those doors were slamming shut, one by one. Eleanor's phone wouldn't stop ringing, not with calls of support, but with cancellations. The symphony board wanted her to step down. The garden club was re-evaluating her membership. Even her weekly tennis partners suddenly had scheduling conflicts. "This is a nightmare," Eleanor muttered, watching another news report about the scandal. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her desk as the reporter repeated her racist comments about Olivia. At his temporary apartment, Michael wasn't doing much better. His business partners were demanding emergency meetings. 3 major clients had already pulled out of deals, citing ethical concerns about working with Bradford real estate. "What am I supposed to do?" Michael yelled into his phone. "Mother, are you listening? The Chapman project just cancelled. That's $15 million. "Don't raise your voice at me," Eleanor snapped back. "I'm trying to fix this. Judge Harrison's wife assured me." "Enough about Judge Harrison's wife. Don't you get it? Your video is everywhere. No judge in Boston will touch our case now." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Olivia was surprised to find the chairman of the board, Dr. James Reynolds, waiting in her office. "Hell of a week you're having," he said kindly. "I wanted you to know the board voted unanimously this morning. We're establishing a new diversity initiative in your name, the Olivia Stevens Fellowship for Underrepresented Medical Students." Olivia sat down, stunned. James, that's incredible. It's the least we can do, and there's something else. We'd like you to head the cardiology department. Across town, Madison Wells was discovering that karma had a sense of humor. As she sat in her lawyer's office, she realized just how badly Eleanor Bradford had played her. The good news, her lawyer said, is that Dr. Stevens isn't pressing charges for your involvement in the conspiracy. The bad news? Your teaching license is under review. But I have bills to pay. That apartment, the apartment Mrs. Bradford rented for you? She's canceled the lease. Madison's face crumpled. Everything she'd been promised was disappearing. But she still had one card to play, her phone with all those incriminating recordings. At school, Emma was surprised to find herself becoming something of a hero. Girls who'd never talked to her before were suddenly sitting with her at lunch, sharing stories about their own experiences with racism and family betrayal. "Your mom is so brave," her friend Sophia said during dance practice. "My aunt went through something similar, but she was too scared to stand up to her in-laws." Emma smiled, thinking about how her mother still made time to help her practice for the upcoming recital, despite everything happening. "Mom says being scared is okay. It's what you do when you're scared that matters." Marcus was having a harder time. Basketball practice wasn't the same with everyone whispering about his family, but things changed when he finally told his teammates the whole story. "Man, you protected your mum when you found out," his best friend Carlos said. "That's what matters. And now you're standing by her. That's real strength." At home that evening, Olivia was helping Emma with her ballet stretches when her lawyer called. "Madison Wells wants to meet," Sarah said. "She says she has more recordings, not just of Eleanor, but of conversations with Michael, too. Apparently he knew about his mother's plan all along." Olivia looked at Emma, peacefully practicing her dance moves, and felt a fresh wave of anger. Michael hadn't just betrayed her. He'd betrayed their children's trust in him. "Set up the meeting," Olivia said firmly. That night, as she helped, waiting with a stack of papers, she'd known Olivia would need them today. The final divorce agreement, the custody arrangement, and something else. Proof that Eleanor's conspiracy went far beyond just Olivia's marriage. "Did you know?" Olivia asked Michael, sliding the documents across the table. "Did you know your mother did this before? That Madison wasn't the first young white woman she paid to break up a marriage she didn't approve of?" Michael's face went pale as he read the evidence. 3 other families, 3 other marriages Eleanor had destroyed because she didn't approve of her friends' or business partner's choice of spouse. She said she was protecting me," Michael whispered. "No, she was protecting her vision of what the Bradford family should be. And you let her do it. Even worse, you helped her do it." At that moment, both their phones buzzed. Marcus had sent them a video. Emma's dance recital was starting, the one Michael had promised to attend. "She asked about you this morning," Olivia said softly. "Wanted to know if her daddy would be there to watch her dance. What should I tell her?" Michael stared at his phone, at his daughter's message. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I destroyed everything." "Yes, you did. But here's the difference between you and me, Michael. I'm building something new from the ashes of what you destroyed. Our children will learn that love doesn't bow to prejudice, that strength comes from standing up for what's right, not what's easy." Olivia stood up, smoothing her red dress. "The papers are there if you want to do one decent thing for your children. Full custody to me, the house, and a clean break. Or we can let Madison's recordings and your mother's other victims tell their stories in court. Your choice." As she walked out of the restaurant, cameras flashing, Olivia held her head high. She had one stop to make before Emma's recital, the DA's office, where Madison Wells was finally ready to tell the whole truth about Eleanor Bradford's decades of manipulation. In her mansion, Eleanor watched her empire crumble on live television. Behind her, a team of detectives were already knocking on the door, armed with questions about conspiracy, fraud, and years of paying people to destroy families she deemed unsuitable for her social circle. The reign of Eleanor Bradford was over, and in a red dress that symbolized both power and rebirth, Olivia Stevens was just getting started. The lights dimmed in the school auditorium as Emma's dance recital was about to begin. Olivia slipped into her seat just in time, still wearing the red dress from her confrontation with Michael. Marcus sat beside her, holding a bouquet of roses for his sister. "Is Dad coming?" he whispered. Olivia squeezed his hand. "Focus on your sister, baby. This is her moment." But Michael Bradford wasn't at the recital. He was sitting in his lawyer's office, staring at the divorce papers Olivia had left him. His phone kept buzzing with urgent messages from his mother, but he ignored them all. "The terms are more than fair," his lawyer said, "considering the evidence Dr. Stevens has." "Evidence?" Michael laughed bitterly. "My mother's recordings, Madison's confession, all those other families we hurt." At the DA's office, Madison Wells was still talking. She had names, dates, bank records, everything Eleanor had used to control her and others before her. "Mrs. Bradford liked to keep things organized," Madison explained, pushing another folder across the table. "She called us her social adjustments. Each time she saw a marriage she didn't approve of, she'd find someone like me, young, white, ambitious. She'd offer us money, connections, whatever we needed." The district attorney leaned forward. "And Mr. Bradford knew about this?" Madison nodded slowly. "He knew. Maybe not everything, but he knew what his mother was doing. He just looked the other way." Back at the recital, Emma was dancing her heart out. She'd chosen a powerful piece about transformation and strength, something that made Olivia's eyes fill with tears. Her daughter had taken their family's pain and turned it into art. In the audience, Olivia noticed Eleanor's old friends whispering and pointing at her, but their gossip didn't matter anymore. The truth was out, and it was more shocking than any rumor they could spread. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the back of the auditorium. Police officers were quietly leading someone out. Olivia turned just in time to see Eleanor Bradford, still in her designer suit, being escorted away in handcuffs. "Mrs. Bradford," one officer was saying, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, harassment, and embezzlement of corporate funds." The mighty Eleanor Bradford, who had terrorized Boston society for decades, looked small and old as they led her away. Her carefully constructed world of privilege and prejudice was finally crashing down. After the recital, as Emma hugged her, mother and brother, her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "I'm sorry I missed your dance, princess. I'm signing the papers. Your mother deserves better." "You all do." Emma showed the text to Olivia, her eyes wet with tears. "Is this really happening? Are we really never going to be a family again?" "Baby," Olivia pulled her daughter close, "we are a family, a stronger one than before. Sometimes love means knowing when to let go of people who hurt you." Marcus wrapped his arms around them both. "We don't need him, Em, or Grandma Eleanor. We've got each other." At the police station, Eleanor was learning just how far she had fallen. Her high-powered lawyers couldn't help her now, not with Madison's evidence and the testimonies of all the other families she had destroyed. "I did nothing wrong," she insisted, as they took her fingerprints. "I was protecting my family's reputation." "By destroying other families?" the booking officer asked. "By paying people to break up marriages because you didn't approve of them?" In her mansion that night, now empty of servants and family, Eleanor's phone rang one last time. It was Michael. "Mother," he said quietly, "I signed the divorce papers. It's over." "Michael, no, you can't let that woman win." "That woman?" Michael's voice hardened. "Her name is Olivia. She's the mother of my children, and you never gave her a chance because of the color of her skin. I let you poison everything. Good in my life, but not anymore." He hung up, leaving Eleanor alone with the consequences of her actions. Back at home, Olivia tucked Emma into bed like she used to when she was little. "Mom?" Emma asked sleepily. "I'm proud of us, for standing up to Grandma Eleanor, for not letting her win." "Me too, baby, me too." In her own bedroom, Olivia finally took off the red dress. She hung it carefully in her closet, a reminder of the day she took her power back. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chen. "DA wants to meet tomorrow. They're going after Eleanor's whole network. You started something big, Olivia." Looking in the mirror, Olivia saw a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Eleanor Bradford had tried to break her family apart using racism and money. Instead, she had only proven what Olivia had known all along. True strength comes from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The morning headlines hit Boston's elite like an earthquake. Bradford scandal expands. Prominent socialite accused of decades of manipulation. Eleanor's arrest photo was splashed across every newspaper in the city, but it wasn't just Eleanor's face in the news. Other wealthy families were being exposed too, the ones who had helped her, who had known about her schemes and said nothing. "The Andersons just cancelled their hospital donation," Dr. Reynolds told Olivia in her new office as head of cardiology. "They're afraid of being connected to Eleanor Bradford," Olivia smiled. "Let me guess, they're suddenly planning a long vacation?" Palm Beach seems to be popular this time of year. All across Boston, Eleanor's former friends were running scared. Some had already fled to their summer homes or overseas properties. Others were hiring crisis management teams, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. At the DA's office, Madison Wells was still naming names. Mrs. Bradford kept detailed records, she explained. She called it her social cleansing project. Every time she saw an interracial couple or someone she thought wasn't suitable for her circle, she'd start plotting. The prosecutor looked up from her notes. And these other society women helped her? They called themselves the committee, Madison said. They'd meet at the country club every Thursday. Eleanor would assign them targets, families to investigate, marriages to break up. It was like a game to them. At school, Marcus was surprised to find some of his classmates' parents being mentioned in the investigation. The mother of his lab partner had been part of Eleanor's committee. So had his soccer coach's wife. It's crazy, he told Emma over lunch. Remember all those fancy charity events Grandma Eleanor used to host? Turns out they were just covers for their real meetings. Emma pushed her food around her plate. Dad called again this morning. He wants to have dinner with us. What did Mom say? That it's our choice. She won't stop us if we want to see him. Meanwhile, Michael Bradford was learning just how far his mother's influence had reached. As he sat in his office reviewing company files, he found evidence that Eleanor had been using Bradford Real Estate to funnel money to her schemes for years. His phone rang. It was his biggest investor. Michael, we need to talk about your mother's involvement in the company. Across town, Olivia was in a meeting with the hospital board. They weren't just discussing the new diversity initiative anymore. Now they wanted her to lead a complete overhaul of the hospital's community outreach program. Your story has inspired a lot of people, Dr. Stevens, the board chairman said. We've received calls from medical students all over the country. They want to know about the fellowship program you're heading. Olivia thought about all the times Eleanor had tried to make her feel small, unworthy of the Bradford name. Now that same name was becoming synonymous with scandal, while Olivia's star was rising. At the courthouse, Eleanor Bradford's bail hearing wasn't going well. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a concerned mother who had gone too far, but the evidence told a different story. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, Mrs. Bradford didn't just interfere with her son's marriage. She ran an organized campaign of discrimination and harassment against numerous families. We have evidence of at least 12 marriages she deliberately sabotaged because she didn't approve of the couple's racial or social backgrounds. Eleanor sat there in her designer suit, watching her world crumble. Her phone had been seized as evidence. Her friends weren't taking her calls. Even her country club membership card had been cut up and mailed back to her. That evening, as Olivia helped Emma with her homework, she got an unexpected call from one of Eleanor's victims, a woman named Grace Chen. I read about your story, Grace said. 20 years ago, Eleanor Bradford paid someone to break up my marriage to David Richardson. His family owned Richardson Shipping. Eleanor didn't think a Chinese-American woman was good enough for their social circle. Olivia listened as Grace told her story, one that echoed her own experience too closely. Would you be willing to testify? She asked. I've already called the DA, Grace replied. We all have. Every family Eleanor Bradford tried to destroy. We're not staying quiet anymore. Later that night, as Olivia tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked a question that broke her heart. Mum, do you think Grandma Eleanor ever really loved us? Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. I think Eleanor Bradford loves power more than people. She loved the idea of controlling her perfect world. But real love, baby? Real love means accepting people for who they are, not trying to force them to be who you want them to be. In her cell at the county jail, Eleanor Bradford was learning just how far she had fallen. Her lawyer had brought more bad news. Michael had resigned as CEO of Bradford Real Estate and was cooperating with investigators. Your son provided documents showing how you used company funds, her lawyer explained. And Ms. Wells, she gave them everything, Eleanor. The recordings, the bank records, even your private notebooks. Eleanor's perfectly manicured hands shook as she realized the truth. She had finally gone too far. Her racism and manipulation hadn't just destroyed her son's marriage, they had destroyed her entire empire. Back at home, Olivia opened her closet and smiled at the red dress hanging there. She had another important meeting tomorrow, this time with a group of medical students who wanted to learn about standing up against discrimination in healthcare. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom, I'm proud of you. You showed us what real strength looks like. Olivia touched the red dress gently. Eleanor Bradford had tried to break her spirit, but instead she had only made it stronger. Now Olivia Stevens wasn't just surviving, she was thriving and helping others find their strength too. The Boston Globe called it the Bradford Effect. All across the city, powerful families were facing a reckoning as more victims of Eleanor's schemes came forward. Each story was more shocking than the last. "We've received over 30 testimonies," District Attorney Sarah Mitchell told reporters outside the courthouse. Mrs. Bradford and her associates didn't just target interracial couples, they went after anyone they deemed unsuitable for their social circle. Immigrants, self-made entrepreneurs, anyone who threatened their vision of old money Boston. Eleanor watched the news coverage from her jail cell, her perfectly maintained facade finally cracking. Her lawyer had just delivered more bad news. Michael had turned over everything. Years of company records showing how she'd used Bradford real estate to finance her schemes. "Your own son, Eleanor," her lawyer said, shaking his head. "He's cooperating fully with the investigation." At Bradford Real Estate, Michael was packing up his office. The board had asked for his resignation, but he'd already decided to step down. As he took down the family photos from his wall, he paused at one of Emma's dance recitals. He hadn't been to a single one this year. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Dad, can we talk? There's a coffee shop near school." Across town, Olivia was addressing a packed auditorium at the hospital's medical conference. Her story had drawn attention from healthcare professionals nationwide. "Discrimination doesn't always show itself in obvious ways," she told the crowd. "Sometimes it wears designer clothes and hosts charity events. Sometimes it calls itself tradition or protecting the family name. But no matter how it disguises itself, we have to stand against it." In the audience, Emma sat with Marcus, watching their mother with pride. She'd become more than just a respected doctor. She was becoming a symbol of resistance against systemic racism in Boston's elite circles. "Dr. Stevens," a young resident approached after the speech. "I'm a first-generation immigrant. Last year I was passed over for chief resident because certain board members thought I wouldn't fit in. After your story came out." "You got the position?" Olivia asked. The young woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "They're reviewing all their policies now. Your courage changed everything." At the country club, Eleanor's former friends were scrambling to save themselves. The committee's Thursday meetings were now being held in lawyers' offices as they faced investigations into their roles in Eleanor's schemes. "Mrs. Whitmore," the investigator said to one of Eleanor's closest allies, "we have evidence that you helped target at least 5 families. Would you like to explain these bank transfers?" Madison Wells, who had once been Eleanor's perfect weapon, was now her biggest threat. Her testimony had opened the floodgates. Eleanor Bradford didn't act alone, Madison told investigators. She had help from judges, business leaders, even some hospital board members. Anyone who owed the Bradford family favors was expected to help destroy these unsuitable marriages. In the hospital cafeteria, Olivia was having lunch with Grace Chen, one of Eleanor's earliest victims. 20 years of pain poured out as Grace shared her story. "After Eleanor broke up my marriage to David," Grace said, "I left Boston. I couldn't face the whispers, the judgment. But when I saw you standing up to her, you came back to fight," Olivia finished. Grace nodded. "We all did. Every family she hurt. We're not hiding anymore." At the coffee shop near his school, Marcus sat across from Michael. The distance between father and son felt like an ocean. "I've been seeing a therapist," Michael said quietly, "trying to understand why I let mother control everything, why I was so weak." "We're not here to talk about you," Marcus cut him off. "Emma's big showcase is next month. If you want to start making things right, show up. Actually be there for her." Meanwhile, Eleanor's empire was crumbling piece by piece. The charity foundation she'd used as a cover shut down. Her social clubs disbanded. Her friends either under investigation themselves or pretending they'd never really known her. That evening, as Olivia, "Bradford," a reporter called out, "do you have any comment on your sentence?" Eleanor kept her head down, but everyone could see. The mighty Eleanor Bradford was finally broken. Back at the Arts Center, Olivia's phone was buzzing with messages. The hospital board, watching Emma's showcase live-streamed, had unanimously approved her proposal for a new community health initiative. The Olivia Stevens Foundation would work to address racial disparities in healthcare across Boston. "Dr. Stevens," a young black medical student approached her after the showcase. "Your story, your daughter's dance. It gives us hope. Things really can change." Marcus put his arm around his sister. "Mom, we should celebrate, both Emma's performance and Grandma Eleanor's sentence. "Actually," Emma said, "I have a better idea. Remember that little ice cream shop Grandma Eleanor said was too common for the Bradford family? Let's go there." Olivia laughed. "Perfect." As they headed out, Michael watched his family leave. He had lost them, but maybe, just maybe, he could earn back a small place in their lives. Not as the man he was, but as the father he should have been. That night, as Olivia tucked Emma into bed like she was still a little girl, her daughter said something that made her heart swell. "Mum, when I changed my name to Stevens, it wasn't just because of what Grandma Eleanor did. It's because you showed me what our name really means. Strength, love, standing up for what's right." Olivia kissed her daughter's forehead. "Get some sleep, baby. Tomorrow's a new day." And it truly was. Eleanor Bradford was behind bars, her empire of hate dismantled. The committee members were facing their own reckonings, and all across Boston, families she had tried to destroy were reclaiming their stories, their dignity, their truth. In her home office, Olivia looked at the red dress hanging on her wall, now framed like a battle flag. It had become more than just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of every person who ever stood up against prejudice and won. 1 year later, Boston was a different city. The Bradford scandal had triggered a wave of change that nobody, not even Olivia, could have predicted. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Olivia's new office at the hospital. As chief of medicine, the first black woman to hold the position, she had a clear view of the construction site where the Olivia Stevens Medical Center for Community Health was being built. "The contractor says we're ahead of schedule, Doctor," Reynolds said, reviewing the plans. "Thanks to the donations from all those former Bradford real estate properties Michael signed over." Olivia smiled, remembering how far they'd come. The properties that Eleanor Bradford had once used to finance her schemes were now funding healthcare initiatives for underserved communities. Across town, Marcus was graduating as class valedictorian. From the podium, he looked out at the crowd and saw his family, his mother in another stunning red dress, Emma recording everything on her phone, and in the back, Michael, quietly proud. "A year ago," Marcus began his speech, "our family learned a hard lesson about truth and justice. We learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you can be the ones who hurt you most. But we also learned that real strength isn't about money or social status. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." In the audience, Michael wiped away tears. He'd spent the past year in therapy, confronting the damage his mother's racism had done not just to his family, but to his own soul. He was a different man now, not fully forgiven, but slowly earning back his children's trust. Eleanor Bradford watched the graduation too, on a small TV in the prison common room. Her hair was completely grey now, her designer clothes replaced by prison denim. Around her, other inmates watched Marcus's speech in silence. "That's my grandson," Eleanor said quietly, but nobody responded. Even in prison, her reputation had preceded her. Back at the graduation ceremony, Emma was preparing for her own big moment. She'd been accepted into the Boston Conservatory of Dance on full scholarship. Her showcase piece about her family's journey had gone viral online, inspiring other young artists to tell their stories of overcoming prejudice. "And now," Marcus continued his speech, "I'd like to talk about my mother, Dr. Olivia Stevens. A year ago, she taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is standing up against the people who want to tear you down. She showed me that one person's courage can change not just a family, but an entire community." In her seat, Olivia thought about everything that had happened since that day. She found the photos on the iPad. The committee members had all faced justice. Some were in prison, others had lost their social standing and fortunes. But more importantly, their victims had found their voices. Grace Chen, sitting next to Olivia at the graduation, had started a support group for families affected by Eleanor's schemes. They met weekly, sharing stories of healing and rebuilding. "Dr. Stevens," Grace whispered, "have you seen the news? They're using your story in law schools now, as a case study in how systemic racism can hide behind respectability." After the ceremony, the family gathered at their favorite ice cream shop, the one Eleanor had once deemed beneath them. Michael sat slightly apart, still conscious of his place in their new dynamic. "Dad," Emma said, handing him a spoon, "try the mint chocolate chip. It's better than any of those fancy restaurants Grandma Eleanor used to drag us to." It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Slowly, day by day, they were building something new from the ashes of Eleanor's destruction. That evening, as Olivia prepared for bed, she got an unexpected call. It was Madison Wells. "Dr. Stevens," Madison said, her voice shaking. "I'm getting married to someone my parents don't approve of. I wanted you to know that your story gave me the courage to follow my heart, not other people's prejudices." Olivia sat on her bed, touched by the irony. The woman Eleanor had hired to destroy her marriage was now fighting her own battle against prejudice. "Be happy, Madison," Olivia said simply. "That's the best revenge against people who want to control you with hate." Later, as she helped Emma pack for dance school, Olivia found an old photo album. In it was a picture from her wedding to Michael, Eleanor Bradford standing stiffly beside them, her disapproval hidden behind a society smile. "You okay, Mom?" Emma asked, seeing her mother's expression. "Better than okay, baby." Olivia closed the album. "You know, your grandmother thought she could break us with her racism and her schemes. Instead, she made us stronger. She showed us who we really are." Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Stevens strong," he said, using the phrase that had become their family motto. "Stevens strong," Emma echoed, hugging her mother. The red dress still hung on Olivia's office wall, but she didn't need it anymore to remind her of her strength. She saw that strength every day, in her children's achievements, in her work at the hospital, in the changes happening all across Boston. Eleanor Bradford had tried to destroy what she didn't understand, but in the end, love had proven stronger than hate, truth more powerful than prejudice. And the woman she had tried to break, she had emerged as a beacon of hope, showing others that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in fighting back, but in rising above. The Bradford name might have fallen, but the Stevens family had risen, and their story was far from over.